Hello guys, welcome to the first episode of the Pajabalance Council where each month I will show you guys my picks for Balance Council. And without further ado, let's just get straight into the changes. Um, so my idea here is pretty simple. I mostly want to nerf decks that are the strongest at the top of the ladder right now. And in my opinion, these are Northern Realms and Nilfgaard. I also included an Olgot buff because this card sees more and more play each month. It's been a staple in Skellige Witchers for a long time, and it also sees play in some Fruits of Isgift decks now. And I think it's a bit too strong. And when it comes to the buffs, I wanted to mostly buff cards that are either unplayable right now or feel pretty weak, like Sezenti's Blaze. But yeah, that's the general idea behind this council, and let's just review the changes one by one, shall we? I'm gonna start with the power buffs. So I want to buff Imke to 6 power. I think she's a pretty cool engine that doesn't see any play right now. Her stat line is just way too weak. She comes on the board as a 7 for 9 because she gets you 2 coins instantly. Sometimes those coins are worth more. But yeah, her floor is basically a 7 for 9, which is really, really weak. And honestly, for how her ceiling is, that floor is way, way too little. Like, her ceiling is just getting 2 coins per turn the whole round, which compared with engines like Saul, Bincy, Townsfolk, etc. is really not that much. These engines can get a lot more points than Imke does. So I think a buff is necessary. This card might actually need a double buff in my opinion, but yeah, I want to buff her by power first. It makes her harder to remove. She doesn't die to a boiling oil anymore. Of course, you can apply a shield, but a lot of factions can ping off the shield, like Northern Realms, Skoya, Telf, Precision Strike, Nilfgaard with their soldiers, or with Eternity Joust. This buff does mean that Imke plays more into Enslave. So, as I said, it's very possible that this card will need another either power buff or provision buff, but I think it's a good start to try to make this card playable again. Next we have Murlega. Etriel Murlega duo already got buffed before, and it still doesn't see any play. I think I've seen it in the past 3 months like once, honestly. So I think this duo deserves a buff again. I want to start with Murlega because I think from the duo you quite often will want to play Etriel second, as although it's less points, it will give you more control, and this duo will probably be played in Harmony decks, if anything, that actually struggle for control. So having something like Etriel Murlega as conditional control could be nice. So that's why I want to buff Murlega, so that it's easier for this card to stick, so that you can get the Etriel value. And yeah, like in theory, this duo, if you play Etriel first and go for the maximum amount of points, it can play for, well, Etriel plays for 8, Murlega can play for 15, so it can play for 23 for 12 provisions, which like sounds good until you realize you could just play 2 4 provision cards for like 14 15 points pretty easily. So it's only like 9 8 points better than that. You pay 4 more provisions, and you also need Etriel to stick on the board. It's really not that strong, let's be real. But yeah, I think this duo is pretty cool, and it doesn't see any play, so I will want to try to buff it. Starting with Murlega, we can see this duo sees any more play if you guys decide to buff this card. If not, we could maybe buff Etriel as well. I think it could be a cool addition to Scoia'tael decks. Mostly Harmony, probably, but I mean, you can play it in other decks as well, right? Next, we have Horst Bersodi. This is a pretty similar idea. Again, the duo of brothers this time is basically not played right now. I think it did get buffed before, but I think it was by CDPR. I'm actually not sure. It was when I didn't play the game, so I'm not sure if it was done by Balance Council or CDPR. But yeah, this duo doesn't see any play in Syndicate right now. So, and I think it's also, yeah, a cool little pack. I want to buff Horst first, because even though he's more points than Ewald, again, his utility is kind of smaller, right? I mean, he gives coins instead of doing damage like Ewald does. And control is always kind of more useful, I would say, than other abilities in this game, at least, especially in a very heavy engine meta that we have right now. So yeah, I don't think this card would ever see play without the other brother anyway, so I think the buff to it is completely fine. If you set up the Ewald first in the graveyard, then you can play this card as an 11 for 7, which doesn't feel that strong anyway. I don't think it's gonna be broken or anything, but I think it could be pretty cool. So all of these buffs, I'm not sure these cards will see play after the buffs, but they're completely dead right now, and I want to try to make them playable. And the good thing about buffing Murlega and Horst is that if these cards don't see play, instead of buffing the same card again, we can buff the other card from the duo instead. Kind of spread the buffs a bit more, which I think is pretty cool. And yeah, maybe with a double buff I could see this duo getting played, but for now I want to buff just one card each and see what happens. I'm gonna go to the provision buffs now. Here the idea is pretty similar. I mean, two of these cards are basically not played. Blaze is played in some decks, but yeah, let's go one by one. Plot of Leather, I think, could be a cool payoff for vampires. It's a card that, I mean, potentially can play for a lot of points, but it's also awkward to get usage of. One of the better plays you could do is probably like Leader Charge, something, give it 3 bleeding, then use Plot of Leather on it, give it 6 bleeding. Then your Plot of Leather plays for, with the current stats, 10 points plus 3 bleeding, which makes it a 13 for 8, but because of the fact that it's so awkward to use, as you have to stack a lot of bleeding on one unit, it's a pretty weak card. I mean, it's not played in any of the vampire decks, but I think the ability is honestly pretty cool. It also synergizes a bit with a card that is also not played in vampires right now, which is Unseen Elder, because Unseen Elder procs bleeding on enemy units at the end of your turn, so that makes the bleeding go. He makes the bleeding go faster, basically. So if you play Elder with Plot of Leather, you could potentially stack way more bleeding, and actually get pretty insane value from this card. So I think it's a cool buff. I'm not sure it will see play, but yeah, I just think it's a good idea to buff cards that are not playable, try to give them some help. Same case with Miruna. One thing about Death Wish is, right now Death Wish basically gets carried by the Giant Toad. Like, this card is absolutely insane, and I was thinking about nerfing it, but Death Wish is not really a strong deck right now. So it's probably not a priority to nerf this card, but this card is busted, and I think most of you guys will agree with me on that. So I want to try to buff the less played Death Wish cards. so that we could nerf the Toad and don't feel that bad about it. Because the thing about Toad is it's not only a problem in Death Wish, but also in decks like Vi or the Fruit Snacker deck that is pretty popular right now on top of the ladder. But yeah, I want to start with buffs first. These decks are not problematic enough to warrant a nerf right now, so I would rather buff the unplayed Deathwish cards first. And Miruna has a really cool ability. She can play for loads of points. It's just she's pretty risky to run, right? But because you can yank a useless token sometimes, and she's not gonna play for many points. But I think she could be like a cool pseudo control option for Deathwish to maybe yoink some low power engines that opponents start the round with, like Whisperers or some siege engines or revenants, etc. Right? And yeah, this card basically sees no play right now, so I think it would be a decent buff. And then we have Blaze. This card is really weak right now. Like, even if you play a full deck of dragons, it's very rare that this card grows above 15 power, which shouldn't be the case for a card that costs 12 provisions and can only be played in very specific decks. So I think a small provision buff is pretty perfect for this card. You want Blaze to be at 11 provisions because dragons usually use Oxenfurt Scholars, which profit from having cards at provision cost of 11 or higher. And yeah, I think the 11 cost for Blaze would just fit really well, make the card a bit better. Also buff dragons, which are not really a great deck right now. They're playable, but yeah, I usually don't have any problems beating them on ladder, I have to be honest. So I think that deck could use a little buff like that. And that's gonna be it for the buffs. Let's get into the nerfs now. So right now, in my opinion, as I said before, Northern Realms and Nilfgaard are the best factions at the top of the ladder with multiple playable decks. Northern Realms is mostly Temple Siege right now. That's what most people play at high MMR, but I had very good results with Alumni, and I think Alumni are super underrated by other top players. It's a pretty broken deck in my opinion, but it doesn't see much play. When it comes to Nilfgaard, Enslave is extremely strong right now, both Ivo and Assimilate variants, and also Aristocrats, especially with Ball. The Ball version became pretty popular this month, and yeah, it's been doing really well on ladder with lots of high scores from other players. So that's what I mostly wanted to focus on. So let's get into these changes. Natalis, I think, is a no-brainer. I don't really get why this card hasn't been at 1 power already. I mean, almost all of the other faction tutors that cost 7 provisions are at 1 power except Hermione. And Natalis is definitely one of the stronger ones from this bunch. I mean, tutoring AA is a very, very strong ability. AA is one of the best echo cards in the game. But also cards like Boiling Oil that are useful for removal, or Winch to like proc your Rafar's Vengeance faster, or Damavent is also a really, really strong play. So I think it's a pretty no-brainer change, and I've seen other people suggesting it. I think there's nothing controversial about it. Now, the second change is actually a buff. So the thing is, when I looked at the nerfs, I really wanted to nerf the Slave Driver, as I think this card is way too good at 4 power right now. But what's gonna happen is you guys will nerf this card. This card should stay at 4 power in my opinion. But let's be real, you guys will nerf it like every month, and it's gonna be at 3 power. If we nerf the Slave Driver as well, I don't even mean that this whole combo will be too weak. I don't even care about that. The real problem I see is then next month you guys will vote for this card to be bucket for power and this card to be bucket for power. So in 2 months they will be at the same power and we will achieve nothing. So I want to suggest the slave driver nerf next month instead, so that when Sergeant gets buffed back to 4 power again, then we can nerf slave driver to 3 power at the same time, and then when the yo-yo happens again, it will counteract each other. It's a bit of a weird logic, but yeah, we have to adapt to what the player base is doing, right? So I'm planning to nerf this card next month, and I didn't really like other power nerfs that much, honestly. Like you could consider Wimba Anja, for example, but I would rather nerf her by provisions, and I like my other provision nerfs more here, so yeah. That's why I decided to pick a buff slot for a card that I think could be pretty cool. So if you reduce its power to 1, you can proc this card instantly if you have naval supremacy in the graveyard, right? Because it's gonna damage the unit, so then you can instantly summon a pirate. And that is a pretty strong ability, but it can be awkward to use. I mean, first of all, you need the supremacy in the graveyard. Second of all, you need this card to not get any armor from your leader. I mean, you will play this card in a pirate deck, so if you draw this card round 1, right, and it gets some armor, then it can be really awkward to use. And yeah, if your supremacy gets banished, then this can just get locked and play for 1 point. So it's a high risk, high reward card, and I kinda like it, honestly. It's like a wholesome way to buff pirates that are pretty unplayable right now. So yeah, I like this buff. And then I have Olgot because, as I've mentioned earlier, Olgot starts to see play in more and more decks because people started to realize how strong this carryover actually is. Like, getting potentially 10 carryover is just very, very strong, especially from red coin. So with nerfing Olgot by power, it gives you less tempo, so you get punished more if you play this card on blue coin. On red coin, it also means you can't contest around, which is especially that easily at least, which is especially important in a deck like Skellige Witchers that often plays Olgot round 1, but they then slam so much tempo they're still able to win on even. So reducing the tempo that deck has by 1 can actually be impactful. And yeah, this card sees play not only in Witchers, but also in Precision Strike, control decks, in some Fruits decks, and I mean also some random other piles sometimes. So it's a pretty popular card right now, and honestly, it sees more and more play with every month. I think it could use a nerf personally. And yeah, power nerf just punishes the low tempo aspect of this card even more, which I kind of like. And then let's get to the last bracket, which is the provision nerf slot. So here I have Amphibious Assault as the main pick. I think that's kind of a no-brainer change as well. Assault has been a staple in basically every NR deck recently. It's a very, very broken card. Not only it often plays for a lot of points, right? I mean, you can use it on a Marine for like 13 points, for example. But the more broken part of this card is getting to protect an engine that you can pull out with it, right? So something like a Reinforced Ballista or a Student in the Alumni deck. It's also a great tutor. It can tutor even cards like Vernon Roche right now. I think it's a pretty no-brainer change. I've seen a lot of people wanting to nerf this card, and I kind of agree that this deserves to get nerfed. Speaking of Rush, I actually think this card should also get nerfed by a provision, but I didn't want to include too many NR cards to not over nerf the faction. But I think this card should also get provision nerfed, probably, because its combo with Han Marvin's Blue Dream is very disgusting, honestly, especially in Alumni. It's so many points, and I don't think that combo should exist, to be honest with you guys. If any of you watched my streams or even my alumni gameplay video, then you could see how broken that combo really is in that deck. For now, I'm not voting to nerf Rush, but if NRs is still really strong after catching some nerfs, then I would definitely consider nerfing this card in the future. But okay, let's get into NG nerfs now. Coup de Grace, I think, needs to get reverted. It's just way too strong at 9 provisions, and it doesn't matter that it's in the Necker range. I mean, Necker NG decks are not really strong, but it's played in Assimilate and Aristocrats, and it's extremely strong in both decks. I mean, in Assimilate, you get so much value from it, from just copying some card from opponent's deck that plays for a lot of points. And then in Aristocrats, it's arguably even better to replay a Joachim. So yeah, I mean, this card is so good that I've seen people play it with Rainfarn without any other coup targets, just to copy this card. So yeah, I think this card deserves a revert. I don't think it should be at 9 provisions. It's one of the reasons why Nilfgaard is so strong in this patch. And then for the last provision slot, I wasn't sure which Nilfgaard card I want to nerf. I decided to go for Artfin because, like, the thing is, I think Ivo is a stronger deck right now and Slave with Ivo. But I expect Sergeants to get nerfed, and then the deck will lose 2 power, right, on both of these bronzes already. And then I think people might also nerf some other stuff, Nilfgaard as well, that will influence that deck. And another reason I want to nerf Artfin is because I've seen people wanting to buff Fangs of the Empire, which in my opinion is a very dumb buff, by the way. Just laying it out here. And I am scared that if this buff goes through, then Aristocrats with Ball will be extremely strong. Like, if this buff goes through, it's a 4 power buff to the entire deck. That is a pretty extreme buff, let's be real. And Artfin honestly is one of the most broken locations in the game. I guess it's technically not a location, it doesn't have the tag, but you guys know what I mean. It's a resilient artifact. It's one of the most broken artifacts in the game right now. It can easily play for like up to 30 points, and also it lets you manipulate your top decks, which is a very, very strong ability combined with like cards like Joachim. So yeah, I think this card deserves a nerf anyway. Another card I would highlight is probably Battle Stations, because it's one of the best cards in Nilfgaard, still played in Ivo decks and also in Soldiers. And I was pretty torn between these two cards, but I decided to pick Artfin for now. So yeah, I mean, that's it. As you can see, this council mostly focuses on buffing Syndicate and monsters, because I think these are the 2 weakest factions right now. Also, Scoia'tael buffs. Scoia'tael also doesn't feel strong right now, I have to say. And nerfing Anar and Nilfgaard, because they're pretty clearly the best the best factions right now. Let me know in the comments if you agree with my picks. I'm open to any discussions. Yeah, this is the first time I'm doing this council, so I'm curious how you guys will like my picks, and that's pretty much it. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe as always, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.